From the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and SiriusXM, this is the Work and Life podcast, which explores how to create harmony among the different parts of life: work, home, community, and the private self, your mind, body, and spirit. The conversation you're about to hear was originally recorded on the Work and Life radio show on SiriusXM 111, business radio powered by Wharton. Here is your host, founding director of Wharton's Work-Life Integration Project and author of the bestseller Total Leadership, Professor Stu Friedman.
My guest for this episode of Work and Life is David Burkus, a management professor at Oral Roberts. We spoke about his latest book, Under New Management, and important new practices being implemented around the world, including innovative ways to use email, company vacation non-policies, open workspaces, and more. Now, here is my conversation with David Burkus. David, welcome to the show.
Oh, Stu, thanks so much for having me. It's so great to talk to you again.
It's great for you to be here. Thanks for taking the time. Let's just jump right in. I'd love to know how you got into this study. What led you to want to write about the innovative companies that you highlight in Under New Management? How did you get attracted to this idea, and why is it important for us to know about what's in Under New Management?
Yeah, so I mean, it's probably similar to your work. Everything kind of starts with a question, and that's interesting. And my first book was called The Myths of Creativity, and it dealt with a lot of the misconceptions around creative and innovative work and what that also means for how we structure work and that sort of thing. And it was in that you can't write a book like that and not talk about 3M and 15% time, later Google and 20% time, and a couple other policies and practices a lot of creative firms use to bring out the best in their people. And so that
let me just jump in here, David. The two references you just made, not all of our listeners know about what 3M and Google and other companies are doing to allocate some portion of every employee's time to doing something that they find interesting and cool on their own.
Yes, yeah, sorry about that. So that's the gist of the idea, and there's a lot of research around doing autonomous work as more intrinsically motivating and the enhancement that makes on creativity and that sort of thing. And it was really that set me down this road of, okay, well, I wonder what other sort of different and newer ways to manage knowledge work are out there. And so that's what began the study, and kind of we took a bunch of different ones and we ran it through a couple different tests. The first was, does it work in multiple industries? It's easy to look at a lot of these practices and go, oh, well, that's just technology firms or that's just engineers. So it had to work, at Google, and it had to work at a supermarket or something like that. And then there had to be research behind it. We had to be able to tie it into something from the world of social science to sort of prove why this worked. I mean, that's my background as an organizational behavior. So clearly, if we can't prove it empirically, then it's kind of a good idea that we don't know if it'll scale. So that was really how we arrived at 13 different practices that work across industries and really, I think, represent newer ways to manage this different type of work that we're asking people to do now. Most of our management theories were built on industrial work, factory work, et cetera. And now that we're doing a different type of work, we sort of need to rewrite the rule book.
It is a different world that we are in now, and the practices that you've identified here are emergent in response to the new world order that we're all trying to navigate in terms of technology, globalization, changing values of the workplace. I really appreciate that you found that the best practices, quote unquote, what's worked in one place may not necessarily apply to another organization, that there have to be unique solutions that are grounded in the local context. I mean, this is the essence of what I do with my students and clients with Total Leadership, is to help people to understand what matters most to them, to the people around them, to their world, and then to innovate, to experiment, to create customizable solutions that they try, and then they discover what works and what doesn't. But there is no one best way, or is there?
So I don't know that there's one best way as far as an exact way to have a best practice. Best practice is really code for kind of stuff that other people have tried. And every time I see a company try and adopt a best practice, they always tweak it. And so, in under new management, we look at a lot of different principles, but we look at them from different angles. So to give you an example, I heard you say at the top of the hour to talk about kind of email and the effect that has on our life. Well, there are some companies that are banning it entirely, and others are setting restrictions on it, and all of them are in line with this overall idea that the distraction cost may not be worth the communication cost, but just how you implement it, that varies by company and varies by sometimes even by team or by person.
Well, let's dig into that. Your first chapter is called Outlaw Email. And I think that's an imperative, right? Not the kind of email that's outlawed. But yes, you're saying outlaw email, and it starts, if I can read from it, corporate leaders across the globe are discovering that banning or limiting their employees' access to email is making them more, not less productive. That's an interesting paradox. What did you discover there?
Yeah, so this line of inquiry really started with the discovery of a firm in France, Atos Origin. They're about a 70,000-person IT services firm that decided to pursue the goal of becoming zero email. Zero internal email. Obviously, to some extent, you've got to communicate with clients however the client wants to be communicated with. But in terms of internal processes, they found that it really was not worth the added cost. It's actually a pretty poor medium for communication. There's a lot that's lost between tone of voice, between the real-time aspect of being able to kind of have ideas merge and bounce off of each other. So there's a lot that's lost in the communication. And then the cost of it is, there used to be a time where your email was just at your work computer, and just like your voicemail at the phone on your desk, there was on time and off time, and there was the ability to sort of shut it down. Nowadays, we really don't have that. In terms of home life, if you've got a smartphone, you're taking your work home with you every single night. And even in terms of at the workplace, if Outlook or whatever mail system your company uses is pinging you every 5 minutes with a new email, then it's really limiting your ability to do the deep work that really creates value for the firm. I mean, I think all of us have had those days where we clear out our email inbox and we think, oh, I was so productive today, I'm at inbox 0, and then we realize we didn't actually do very many value-creating opportunities. We just responded to emails all day. And so Atos and several other firms have found this and are beginning to put limits on it. Atos is one of the few I know that decided to ban it entirely and move to a different system for managing communication, but most are... What
replaced email for their internal communication? Some sort of message system, or a version of Slack?
So they built actually a custom, it's kind of like a mix between Slack, Facebook, and a message board in the way that it works. But the biggest thing that it has is it is not interruptive. You only go to it when you want to go to it. And usually projects are, everybody can see the line of communication. So, sometimes you're brought in as a CC, but you can't actually see what's been talked about before in that email thread. That doesn't happen in their system. So you have that background. And they found that this is a better system because it allows people to shut themselves off at the end of the day, but it also allows them when they need to be doing the deep work to not have it interrupt them every time, like an automatic send and receive that's usually going off every 5 minutes for most default settings on email providers. So it's definitely a custom solution. And I mean, to your point earlier about customization, it's definitely a custom solution. But we've seen other firms be able to go straight to something like a Slack. I really don't endorse straight out of the box solutions because I think everybody has to customize it to some extent in order to meet the communication needs of their firm.
So, there are other firms out there, not just in France. There's in Germany, for example, at Daimler. Here in Philadelphia, there's a consulting firm called Vynamic where they're doing something a little bit different, and I'd love your take on this. Where after a certain time, emails are not allowed or they won't be responded to. And in some cases, I think what they're experimenting with at Daimler is they'll actually be deleted if you send an email like over the weekend. So what is your thought about the outlawing of email during prescribed blocks of time that apply universally to everyone in the organization?
Yeah, so my favorite prescription, and I think the one that most firms can adopt, is that idea of blocking off sort of sacred time. And a lot of firms are coming up to this idea of, like you had mentioned, we shut off the servers at a certain time. And in some situations, it's, evenings and weekends. And usually what happens is not that the email's deleted, but it just stays in your outbox. So if you're the one that actually can work at 11 o'clock at night, you can still respond to that email, but it doesn't send until 8 a.m. the next day. So you're not disrupting the people who've decided, no, that is sacred time. That's time for something else in my life. And that's the system that I really, really like. I encourage a lot of companies to go one step further and find a few hours during the work day to also do that. I think usually between 10 and maybe 1 or whatever the most productive hours in your work day are, usually I think you should carve out that time for yourself to be able to do the deep work and not be interrupted too. That to me is, I think, the missing piece from a lot of these mail on holiday or no mail evenings and weekends programs is
build it into the workday.
That work is important too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's just dig a little further on this question of blocking time that outlaws email. One of the critiques of that model is that you apply a universal solution that obviously is not going to work for everyone. Some people are going to want to do their email for a couple hours over the weekend. That makes Monday morning a lot easier for them. So, that's where I've always seen a significant risk in these programs that say you cannot work during this time, because for some people that offline time, quote unquote, turns out to be a really good time for them in terms of how it fits in with their family life structure or what they do in the community or, their own private work, spiritual work, emotional development, physical health needs, whatever it is. Everybody's got a different schedule, right, that suits their lives. So what do you say to that critique, David, of that, the blocked time from an organizations sort of imposing those boundaries might not work for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I think this is one of actually the reasons I'm very for the idea of shutting off the servers, doing it at that level. So, essentially, if you were to say, hey, we don't send emails after 6 o'clock, and then somebody does, and there's a stigma attached to that, then I totally agree with you. The beauty of doing it at the server level is that you can do that send and receive, right before the blocked out time comes in. And if you still want to clear out your email inbox and get ahead on those sort of things, you can still do that. The challenge is email is such an integrated form of communication. I mean, similar to the phone, even if we're doing work at 11 o'clock at night, we would very rarely think, oh, I'm going to call my coworker because this is good time for me. Clearly it's good time for her. We wouldn't do that. But email in 2016 does that. The message goes right to your phone, just like you had sent them a text or called them or whatever. So that's one of the reasons I think doing it at the server level, where you can still respond to the emails. They just build up in the outbox and they don't actually arrive in the other person's inbox until it's a good time for them. I mean, I will say that every company, I think, can't go from zero to no emails. It's a process. And the biggest thing is I'm taking this policy and trying to encourage companies to start the conversation on what works for us. And we might find that's banning email entirely, like an Atos. We might find that's a server thing. We might find it's something else, like even just having a conversation about what in each individual team, what do you want the off hours to be or something like that. But really, that's my goal with the book, is that we at least start this conversation. I'm totally comfortable with the idea of different companies doing different things.
Yeah, I think it has to work that way. And further, to push that idea further, what you want ultimately, I think, is individualized solutions that work for the employee in the context of her larger life, so that what people have is access to the tools and resources that give them the opportunity to work when they want, and to also do the other things that matter to them when it works for them. Let's talk about vacations, because this is, it's summertime when we're speaking right now, and a lot of people are either coming back from vacation or going on vacation. Some people listening might be on vacation right now. What did you discover about quote-unquote unlimited vacation, another one of the practices that you wrote about in
unlimited vacation, or I sometimes like to call it the no vacation policy, right? That our policy is we don't have one. And this came on my radar because of Netflix. They're probably the most popular company to make this switch. Their CEO and some of their senior leaders published this thing they called the I'm forgetting the entire name, but it was essentially their culture slide deck. So it was all about the Netflix culture. They published it online, and that set off sort of a firestorm of attention because they mentioned this unlimited vacation thing. The story behind how it came into being was essentially as they were getting ready to go public, their internal auditors and people like that said, your current system is interesting. It was kind of the usual system. You get a certain number of days off, you use them or lose them, maybe you roll some over, but it was all you keep track of it on your own. And they said that's not enough accountability. We need a more accountable system if we're going to go public because of the level of scrutiny that we're going to be exposed to. And at the same time, there was a couple employees who brought up this idea that you're not tracking the times we're coming in the days, the times we're leaving. You're not tracking the days we're working. Why are you asking us to keep track of the days we're not? And so, leadership got together. They checked with a bunch of the attorneys and said, is there actually a law that says we have to offer a vacation policy? And they found out no. In California, there's no law saying you have to offer a specific number of days or anything like that. And so they said, great, we'll just do away with it all. Our vacation policy is take whatever time you need. And that since then, a lot of companies have adopted that. And across the board, what I think is most interesting is on average, employees at companies take about the same amount of time off. What I like about it is the movement to trust, the idea that says we trust you to manage this in a way that works for you and for us. We're not going to nickel and dime you. We're not going to treat you like children. We're going to trust you. If you betray that trust, we're going to deal with that. But we're going to start from a position of trust. And that's what I really think these policies are about.
Yes, trust and I'd suggest freedom, right? It's giving people the autonomy, as you said earlier, to choose, the where, the when, the how of when they get work done, and of course that enhances commitment and gives people a greater motivation to want to contribute. What have you found about the impact of these companies? And now there are quite a few, and we've actually talked to a few of them on the show here over the last couple of years. What's your take on the performance impact of the no vacation policy? What did you call it? Sorry, I didn't quite get that right.
No, that's exactly right. The no vacation policy.
Okay, good.
Or vacation non-policy, whatever you want to call it.
What's been the performance impact of those?
So there hasn't been a study of, done rigorously enough to make a declarative statement like this goes up. Overall, the trends that we kind of see, I think there are increases in morale, which we know is correlated with increases in productivity. There's increases in that sense of trust, in that autonomy, increases with a lot of things we know are correlated with financial performance. We really haven't done any studies at the level of rigor to say, yes, unlimited vacation policy yields a 10x. Well, that'd be actually amazing, but even a 10% increase in financial performance. We haven't seen that yet. What I do think is interesting is comparing and contrasting the times that the policy is successful increasing in morale to the times that it's not. There are several companies, one I look in the book, the Chicago Tribune company, that implemented the policy and it backfired. And when you dive into the nitty-gritty of how the policy was rolled out, what you see in that particular instance was the way that the policy worked. They had a previous accrued PTO time that got paid out at the end of the year or when you left the organization. And what they said was that everybody's going to go to unlimited vacation policy, but that's going to kick in after you've earned out your paid time off. So in other words, we're not going to pay you for that time that you've earned like we would at the end of the year or when you left. We're just going to let you spend that, and then your unlimited vacation is going to get kicked in. So it immediately betrayed that sense of trust situation. It caused a revolt, and within 3 weeks, they had reverse course to the other policy. And I think that really underscores that point of making sure that people feel this is a move to trust. This is something that is giving more autonomy to people, not a move that we don't trust you and that we're trying to sort of nickel and dime you, et cetera.
In the time we have remaining, I want to make sure we get to your predictions about how you think new management is going to be continually evolving. But before we do, let me just ask you about the open-closed office issue. Almost 30 years ago, I taught at the Helsinki School of Economics for a couple months, and I'll never forget how they had the offices set up there. This was in 1988. In the offices at the Helsinki School of Economics, there were 3 lights outside the door. There was a red, there was an amber, and there was a green. And from inside your office, you lit up whichever one you wanted to signal to anyone outside of your door. And if it was red, it was get the heck away from me. I don't private, do not enter. If it was yellow, you should knock, and then I'll let you know. And if it was green, you just open the door and walk right in. So there were traffic signals there on every person's door. I don't know that you've ever seen that, but I know that you have thought a lot about open offices, closed offices. What did you find?
Yeah, so what's fascinating is that's actually the exact system I use in my home office with my kids. So,
no way.
Similar. We don't have lights. What we have is
you should get those lights, David. I'm telling you, it was very cool.
The door is either unlocked, locked, or locked with a red "Do Not Disturb" sign on it, and so they know that like locked means knock, but red "Do Not Disturb" means hey, I'm in an interview on the radio. Please don't come in at all, right? So we have that.
Sure, bring them in. Let's talk to your kids. Find out the reality of the scene behind the scene for David Burkus.
How well it's working. Yeah, exactly. So overall, I mean, there is definitely with the open office move, there's always the good reason and the real reason, and the reason that we're hearing, the good reason that we're hearing a lot of backing on is this idea of serendipitous collaborations, making it easier to interact with people, increases in communication, all of those sort of things. That's the good reason. I actually think the real reason is it's a whole lot cheaper to maintain an open office, to have just long tables and everybody's got a workstation at the long table, rather than everybody has a built-out office for themselves. I think the cost is what's driving it more than the benefits, because the benefits, when you dig into the research, don't actually outweigh other costs. So there are increases in levels of stress. There are increases in, actually my favorite study shows that people who work in an open office are more likely to call in sick. So either they're legitimately ill or they're just sick of their open office workplace. But in either case, we're seeing a loss in productivity. And I don't believe those benefits outweigh the costs. I think like a lot of other things, the best move we're seeing in office design is to create what I like to call a palette of places. Other architects and designers use different terms, but the idea is we have a variety of different types of spaces, and you have your home base, but you can also find a wide open space for when you want to be around other people. You can find a closed off space for just yourself. You can have conference rooms of all sizes depending on the size of people that you need. So it's this idea of giving people an array of different options and letting them choose what work style works best for them. What workplace works best for them. Because surprise, surprise, one of the best correlations between environment and productivity is perceived control. The extent to which somebody feels like they control their workplace, their work environment, dramatically affects their productivity.
Yes, and that is really an underlying theme here. You also write about the reduction in management hierarchy to the effect of perhaps eliminating it, as some organizations like Zappos famously with their holacracy experiment are doing. So no managers at all is one of the things that you have observed in some organizations. Can you just in 30 seconds give us the headline of what does that look like and how does that actually work?
Well, and just because there's no managers doesn't mean there's no management. I actually like to put it this way now, that management is too important of a job to be left to managers alone. But, the idea is the shift in work that we've been going over for the last 100 years is it used to be that managers knew best what to do. There was one best way. Now it's the person doing the work that usually knows how best to do it. And so a lot of the functions of management are better turned over to that person or that team to manage. And so the role of manager becomes much more coach and guide by the side. And in some cases, companies have found they managed to eliminate it entirely and just have individual contributors and teams managing themselves.
So this decentralization of authority, granting of greater freedom and trust and autonomy to the worker, how do you see that affecting people's lives beyond work?
Well, I think this is sort of the beginning of an awakening that we actually do have more control over our lives than we think. And I think overall that's a good thing. I mean, one of the reasons I've actually been such a fan of the total leadership model is exactly that. It starts with realizing that you have more control over the type of work you do, but you also have more control over your health life, your family life, your spiritual life, et cetera, than you think you do. And that's really what I think is most encouraging, this idea that, I mean, we know from decades of research in self-determination theory and Edward Dici's research that autonomy and a sense of improvement in mastery dramatically improve people's intrinsic motivation and in all levels. So I really see this as a good thing. So long as it's part of a larger trend, I think we're going there. I can see it in the workplace. And now maybe that I need your help studying it in the other domains and spheres of our life. But I think we're there. I think we're getting there, I should say.
Well, I'd be happy to talk with you more about how we can explore that together. Last question for you, though, for tonight, David, and that is, what do you see as you look to the future and the evolution of management thought and practice? especially in light of the gig economy that's emergent, contract employees, and how technology really is continuing on a daily basis to upend, and create all kinds of new possibilities. What do you see unfolding in the years ahead?
I'll tell you what I'm looking at now is I'm fascinated with, I think the gig economy is part of a larger sort of breaking down of the definition between who's in the organization and who's out of the organization. And this isn't a new idea. I mean, Charles Handy talked about this in the 80s, but I think that's what's most interesting is we're seeing an increase in organizational networks and considering stakeholders beyond the people who are just W-2 or 1099 employees. There probably need to be more terms and more definitions for type of workers because we're seeing it work on a network level much more than just an organizational in or out level. And that's really interesting to me, and that's where I'll be looking over the next couple of years because I find it fascinating. I think that's a trend that's going to have a lot more impact on our management ideas.
Yeah, and I would suggest, that this whole question of boundaries extends not just in terms of inter-organizational boundaries and, how those lines are becoming more permeable or just disappearing altogether, but the question that we focus on here a lot on the show. And if you have further insights about this, let's bring you back and talk about them as you explore this research further. Boundaries among the different roles that we play in different parts of our lives. But your research is really very accessible and wonderful to read, and I hope that our listeners will take advantage of the great work that you have put into Under New Management, how leading organizations are upending business as usual. David Burkus, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation.
For me too, and for our listeners, if you want to communicate with David Burkus, one easy way to do that is on Twitter. He is at David Burkus, DavidBurkus, and his book again is Under New Management: How Leading Organizations Are Upending Business as Usual. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with David Burkus. I thought we had some great back and forth on the topics of email's effects on productivity, company vacation non-policies, and the benefits of flexible workspaces. The biggest takeaway? You have more control over the type of work you do than you might think. Thanks for listening to this episode of Work and Life. This conversation was originally recorded on my weekly radio show on Sirius XM 111, Business Radio powered by Wharton. Tune in for live broadcasts of Work and Life on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. For more about today's guest and about previous guests, check out our blog at workandlifepodcast.com. Join the conversation by commenting there or tweeting at Stu Friedman. And for more ideas and tools for creating harmony among the different parts of life, check out our website, totalleadership.org, and my book, Total Leadership: Be a Better Leader, Have a Richer Life. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share it with your friends, family, and coworkers. Until next time, I'm your host, Stu Friedman, and I thank you for joining me.